as part of the initial description when I create a new action. The partition that it belongs to, if I just open up the help file again, here it describes that the partition describes to which the action belongs. And in this case there are 5 options: permanent pre-stress, variable action, accidental action, and earthquake. Here there is also further information for the superposition type that you want to assign to your action. There's also a drop-down box there. And here there are a number of options to choose from. Again, there's an explanation for these in the SOFiLoad manual on the next page along. Although generally, if you create your actions automatically using the software, it will assign the superposition for you. So I'm going to create a new action now. I'm going to click on the New button, and I'd like to create a snow load. So in the Action drop-down box, I'm going to choose Snow Loading. And here it's automatically given me a name. You can modify that to anything that you like. And I simply click OK to that. I have my action is designated as S. The partition it's gone to is variable, this is a variable load. And it's been assigned the superposition conditional. According to the design code that you've used, the safety factors and the combination factors will be chosen automatically. If for some reason you would like to specify a different factor in there, you can do so by clicking on any section of it and modifying. However, we do urge caution when doing this that you do this in accordance with whichever design code you're using. Okay, so I'm going to leave the Load Case Manager now, and next I'm going to open up the Load Case browser. Here I have the option to change which of my loads are displayed at any one time. If I select or deselect certain boxes, then I can specify only which loads I want to be displayed at one time. It's going to be very useful when you have multiple loads on your structure, or if you have a complicated 3-dimensional structure, then it can be very useful to be able to turn these off. Using the 2 buttons at the bottom here, Previous and Next, you can cycle through your different load cases. And you can cycle through whichever way you want. Here there are further options to display other types of loads if you have a number of different loads in your file. So point loads, line loads, area loads, or volume loads, you can turn any of those on or off for view. So if I deselect my area loads, they're all switched off. The rest of them are currently greyed out because I only have area loads in my file at the moment. So I'm just going to switch all of those back on. You must remember to do this when you leave the Load Case browser, or you may miss some of your loads. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is to delete 2 of my areas. I'm just going to drag and select those and then use the delete tool. Then what I'm going to do is to go back into my Load Case Manager, go back to the Load Cases tab, and if I right click anywhere in the box here, I have the option to delete unused load cases. And because I've deleted 2 of my areas, I now have 2 load cases that are unused. So I'm going to select that. It gives me a quick warning. 2 load cases are not used. Do you want to delete them? I do. So I click yes, and then it takes me back to the Load Case Manager where it shows me that I only have 2 load cases remaining. The option to delete these unused load cases is also available in the SOFiPLUS sidebar. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just quickly create another couple of structural areas. So I right click and use point in area again. I'll click in that first area. This time I'm only going to specify a dead load. So in the live load I simply change that to 0 and click OK, and then I've only been given a live load. And then I'm going to do the same again in the second area. Once again I'm going to specify a live load as 0. The next thing I'm going to do is to use a structural element load. There are two types of load that you can apply separately to your structural areas. First is structural element load. This will assign a load to your structural element and it will be attached to the geometry of that. The difference between the structural element loads and the free loads is that the free loads are not dependent on the structure geometry. However, we'll discuss that in greater detail in part 6 next week. So I'm going to create an area load now. In this dialog box I now have the option to specify a value for my load. I can determine which load case it's assigned to. I can also go directly to the load case manager by clicking on the box with the 3 dots, and here I can create, delete or do whatever I need to. There are several classes that you can assign this area load as. You can assign it as factor, load, moment, a displacement, a strain, a temperature, or internal pre-stress. Though most of the time I think you will use a load or a moment. In my case I'm going to leave it as a load. I can also choose the direction in which it acts. Here I have some further options. I can choose a PG as they currently are, load in the gravity direction. I can also choose a local Z direction or a global Z direction. I'm just going to leave this in the gravity direction for now. I'll leave that as 10 kilonewtons per square meter. Click once on my drawing and now it asks me to select an object. I'm going to select area 3 for that to be applied and then right click to accept. Now what I've done there is I've applied that as a dead load, and I would prefer to assign that as a variable load instead, so I can go back and edit that area load by using the modify area load tool. It simply asks me to select the object. If I select anywhere on the load and right click, it takes me back to the window. This time I have the option to assign a name, which you can do, and this will then be applied to the display on the SOFiPLUS window. What I would like to do here is to define a new variable load action to apply this load as. So I'm going to go back into the load case manager. I already have a variable load specified in my actions, so now I'm going to create a new load case. Here I can assign it a name and call that variable. An action. The Q load is already selected for me, and all I need to do is click OK, and now I have a third load case to apply that to. To my second area here I'd like to apply my snow load. So I'm going to use the define structural area load tool again. This time for my load case I don't already have a snow load case assigned, so I can go and create one now. I'll select New. In this case, I will call it Snow Load. And then in the action box, I just need to select my snow loading and click OK. And then I click once again on my drawing. It asks me to select the object. All I have to do is to select the structural area and right click. I think you'll agree that 10 kilonewtons per square metre is a little high for snow, so I'll just go back once more and edit to a more sensible number. And once again you can see that it's applied in this scaled manner. Other options for modifying the loads that are upon the structural areas you've specified. You can go back to the Modify Structural Areas tool and you can select an area, right click to accept. And this time in the Loads tab you will see that the structural element area load that you've applied now appears in this box. The original dead load that was specified still appears in the default structural area loads. When you come to modify more than one area, if you go back to the Modify Structural Areas tool, and if I select my areas 2 and 3 and right click, this time it tells me that some loads have been filtered out as they are not available on all selected elements. And this is because I have two different structural element area loads applied to areas 2 and 3, and they cannot be displayed in this loads box. However, because I do have my dead load specified as a default structural area load, then they do still appear in the dialog box. For modifying more than one structural area load at a time, you'll need to use the Modify Structural Area Load tool. And with this tool, instead of selecting the structural area, you can select the load itself. And then right click, and here you can see the information for the areas you've selected. Here the value varies and also the load case varies. It is also possible to use the Structural Element Area Load Modify tool on the default structural area loads that are first defined when I create my structural areas. So, for example, my dead load on my first structural area, I can then change that to a value of 5. And if I go back into the Modify Structural Area tool, then you can see in the Default Area Loads box, it's been changed and reflects as 5 that I've just changed it to. One further note to finish this part of the SOFiPLUS while we're using these structural element area loads is if you click once on any structural area, you can use the blue grips to pull and define the structural area. And because the loads are linked to the geometry of the structure, they also change with it. Okay, I'm going to leave that now for this session, and we're going to pick up again on the use and generation of these loads in part 6, which will be next Thursday at 2 o'clock Central European Time again. There will be a further series of SOFiPLUS that come after this series. We'll be doing a short series on the basics of